Situation Room this Thursday. And as we get into that conversation, our guest for this hour is already seated. And as we get into that, we're going to welcome Wakili Njeru Benjamin. He's an advocate of the High Court of Kenya and a partner at MNW and Advocates. Good morning, Wakili.
Good morning. How are you?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm well again. You'll be fine. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Welcome to the hot seat of the Situation Room. And even as we look into matters at Justice Thursday, we're going to say welcome to you. Welcome with our proverbs, which CT brings from around Africa. Okay? He's our resident proverb clause. Santa Claus, proverb clause. Okay, it's not about that. And so you'll hear today's proverb. Let us know what you think about it and then how you would interpret that.
Okay.
When the eyes cry, the nose does not rejoice.
Interesting. I think what I can interpret from that is that when things are so closely connected, one usually affects the other. So that relates in our daily lives.
This is true.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't even think you have to complicate it anymore because it's simple, it's straightforward, it makes sense to each and every one of us. Well done. All right, so it is a Justice Thursday conversation that we're having. And one of the things that we're looking at today is the change of names and the documents after separation or divorce. Big issues here.
Yes.
And even as we look at what happens between two individuals when they would have been in a state of whatever you want to call it and have to come to the point where they separate. We're going to just give a little bit of a highlight. We heard it in the news a few minutes ago in terms of what happened with Rebecca Cheptegei, who's the Ugandan Olympic athlete. She was set on fire by her Kenyan boyfriend, and she has unfortunately passed away due to complications with internal system failure. And so doctors are trying to do whatever they could to make sure that she lived at least. 80% burns, internal system failure. Unfortunately, she's passed. The dispute that happened between them, the details of it, we know. The intimate details of it, we don't know. But look, it's quite unfortunate that she had to lose her life. I mean, it just is sad, and may she rest in peace, and that may justice be done. We're having that conversation akin to that this morning and on our Justice Thursday conversation and saying, okay, look, when it comes to separation, when it comes to divorce, how do you revert back to how you were before? So let's get into some of the legalese of that today, Wakili, and to say, okay, so you're here, you are in a legal, because marriage is a legal relationship now. You've been allowed to go forth. At the point now where you want to end this for whatever reason, are you able to go back to factory settings, as it were?
Names have been changed since the dawn of time. I think even in the Bible, in Genesis, God changed Abraham's name. He was Abram, became Abraham. So it has been done since the dawn of time. Nothing is different today. It's just been codified to be simpler, to change your name under the letter of the law. So it happens whether you're married, whether you're single, whether you're a minor. So for sure, it happens, and it's an easy process, which I'll be explaining today.
Okay,
Yes.
so why don't we get into it? What are the processes of changing? Name change. I mean, so of course, marriage, divorce is just one of the circumstances under which names would change.
Sure.
There are very, very many of them. And how do you go about that? If I decide that I want to change my name today, what am I doing? Where am I going? How am I going about it?
So I'll try to simplify it as much as I can. And generally speaking, we do a change of name through what we call a deed poll. A deed poll is a document that is registered under the Register of Documents in the Registration of Documents Act. So what that means is that you apply to change your name based on the documents that you provide for the registrar. One of these documents is your birth certificate, which indicates the name you're given at birth. Another of these documents is your ID, which is what changes after your change of name. Another document is a statutory declaration by someone who knows you and can vouch that this is person X and X and is known by these names. Another document, of course, is a letter from your area chief verifying that this is so-and-so. And then we'll need also fingerprints from the NSSF. You need to get your fingerprints taken. So a lot about a name change is governed because of the issues around it that exist in terms of you could be changing your name for fraud. You could be changing your name in the context of a marriage without the consent of your partner to get into another marriage and commit an offense. So all of these things need to be regulated. So that is why a deed poll exists, so that a change of name is proper to ensure that you've undergone through all the processes and you have the legal capacity to enter into such a transaction. So other than that, mostly we're going to be focusing on marriage, which now means that this is governed under the Registrations of Persons Act. So what that means is that you apply to the registrar saying, look, I am either in a marriage and I want to change my name because I took my husband's name and I do not want it anymore. Or I got out of a marriage and therefore there is no need for me to go by my husband's name anymore. So those two are quite different, because when you're outside of a marriage, then what you'll need to produce is your divorce decree absolute to show that indeed you're out of this marriage, and then apply for the change of name.
Do you have to take the name change in the first place when you get married?
You don't have to. You don't have to, but most people prefer to. So you'll find a lot of people who are married and still retain their father's name. Others opt to go to the Registrar of Persons, who now sits at Huduma Center. You go apply through an affidavit, of course, show your marriage certificate. I'm married to this person. You show up with your ID and your husband's ID, and the name change is effected to the effect that you get an ID with the name of your husband at the end. That's why you find people have hyphenated the husband's name. So you don't have to.
And that can only happen if you're married.
Yes, you can only take your husband's name if you're
Yeah,
married.
you can't decide that I like the way Muga sounds, and
Yes.
I also want to be called.
I'm
You and I are friends, and then we say, okay, I like the way your name sounds. Since
Yes,
we
exactly.
see each other every day,
Yes.
I can decide. Okay, I want to be called Muga as well.
Yes.
You must be.
You must be in a marriage.
No. You can take up a different name, but now the process would be different. You'd have to go through the deed poll way. I can decide to call myself Benjamin Jeru Muga. So I'll do the deed.
Choice for name. It's good.
Opinions would vary, but okay. So I can go the deed poll way to change my name to Muga, but in the event of a marriage, just to make the process easier, because it's not a technical process at all. You do not have to get these names gazetted as a change of name. You'll just go to the Registrar of Persons with the ID of your husband and your ID and a statutory declaration of the same, and the same will be effected. The difference is in the processes. Yes.
So that's what politicians did, the likes of Babayao, quote unquote, in terms of changing names.
Those ones went through a deed poll.
Through a deed poll.
Yes, correct.
How long after divorce should a woman wait till she changes her name? Is there a time frame, or it can, straight from court and start the process thereafter?
Again, a divorce is a fairly lengthy process, which once it ends and you get a decree nisi and then a decree absolute, then you're completely divorced. That marriage is ended.
What are those? Who Nisi?
Once you get a divorce,
Absolute.
The niece is absolute.
once you get a divorce, basically just to make it very simple, once you get a divorce, there's a document that actually shows that you're divorced.
Yes.
That's a decree absolute. And that's what you take to the registrar to confirm that indeed I took this name because I was married and this marriage does not exist anymore.
Yeah.
Therefore, I am lodging this together with my other documents to change my name back to what it was before I was married.
What if it's a nice name and you like it and you just want to, hang on to it? Can you do that? If you've gotten divorced and you like the name, can you still keep it?
That's yes, you can. You can still go on maintaining the said name, but then people get divorced for various reasons, and others prefer to get married again, and that would again bring other issues. Yes.
Why should it bring the issues? Are you marrying the name of the person?
Where mtu anakuita jina la nani. You don't like it.
You see, traditionally, people didn't assume their husbands' names or the spouse's names. They did not. You were your name, if you're a lady, because this thing just affects the ladies, the women. It doesn't affect the men, okay? And you were known. So and so, either the addition was where you come from, the daughter of so and so. And in many communities, that changed when you had a child.
So you became somebody's mother.
You were so and so, the mother of so and so. For further identification, if there were people in that community who had a similar name, then you'd be the wife of so and so. So, and if there was also doubt, then the daughter of so and so who comes from this place. So the identification process was clear. In fact, as I said, the only time the name changed and it stuck was the name of the child who you first bore. Mama so and so.
This is true, but it was just the woman because you were the daughter of.
Yes.
Then you became the wife of.
Yes.
Then
Yes.
you became the mother of.
And then the mother of took precedence.
But the fella has just been the fella who he is.
Yeah,
He's
he just remains who he is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And in case of doubt, if he was polygamous, then he could be identified as the husband of, and then you mention.
All the wives.
Yes.
Many of them.
So and
How has that changed from a traditional setup to now when we're looking at a legal, judicial setup? Has that taken away from any of that, Wakili?
You see, I agree with him in that it's a very Western concept, the whole assumption of the husband's name. And the laws themselves, the Registrations of Persons Act, are borrowed from the West, ideally. So what that means is the name itself, even, I'll give an example. If you're in a marriage, you've assumed your husband's name and you don't want it anymore. And you want to go through the whole, the same process of changing your name. You need to get consent from this man you're married to in order for you to revert back to the name that you had because you're in the marriage with them. So all of these concepts they're not African concepts. They are very Western concepts because the West are the ones who practice that whole taking up the name, hyphenating the name, all of that. We just borrowed it and appropriated it.
Okay.
Yes.
Do men change their names for the women that they marry?
Not to the best of my knowledge.
Would there be a problem with that?
Well,
I'm asking the question because all of this seems to be vested
yes.
in the man, which you want to also, if we're going to go towards tradition, or whether you're going to talk about Western influence, it was that the man is the one who took a wife. So then everything, according to her, then became vested in him. Where the children came from were as a result of his identity, the name for him. So the question about whether a man would ever take it never would really come out unless it was something of personal preference.
Yes, I don't think the law envisioned it because when you read the Registrations of Persons rule, under Rule 9, which is what sets the process of changing back to what you were before the marriage or changing your name within a marriage, it does not envision a man.
Plus, we're also coming from the place where women were property.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not saying this. I'm not trying to be political. I'm just saying that was the way it was. That at the time it was another thing that you acquire. You've acquired a wife. You've acquired land. You've acquired now a wife. So it was never deemed that it was the woman then who would be giving any kind of identity to this relationship.
Yes.
But you know what is interesting is that there is the element of independence. Yeah? The Mrs. So and this and the other actually connotes and denotes the very thing that you mentioned regarding possession. Okay? But in an African setting, the lady retained her names. Okay? Philomena Atieno. That was her. She was Philomena. Okay? And everything else followed. But her identity was intact. And when you talk about the father, you talk about where they come from originally. You see, you are not diluting that identity. At no point is that identity lost, as I said. Now, the changing of names and the significance is a question you want to ask. When the Westerners determined that for someone to understand marriage, someone had to assume the other person's name. Okay, what is the thinking behind it?
think the thinking behind it was what she said about having women viewed as property, because initially you were your father's property. That is why you assumed your father's name. And when you got out of your father's homestead and went into the man's homestead, you had to assume the same name, because what gives you identity also sort of owns you. You're owned by your culture, you're owned by your people, so same concept, I guess.
That's interesting, because we have, and I think it's very interesting because I've seen this in Kenya quite often, and I just seen a comment by on socials about that, is that there are quite a number of men who take on their mother's name, even if they may have knowledge of their father, but they take on their mother's name as a source of identity. Where does that come from?
Culturally speaking, and from my experience, it is the circumstances where the man has been raised by solely the mother and therefore identifies with the mother. Remember, a name is just a form of identity. So if you don't identify with the father, most cultures just appropriate the name of the mother. So they'll take it up and they'll run with it. So that is what the mother will actually register in the birth notification. That is what now will be found in the birth certificate. And so if you look at the Births and Deaths, the Registration of Births and Deaths Act at Section 14, there is a small provision at Section 14 that allows for you to change your child's name before 2 years, before they reach 2 years, by applying to the registrar. It's not a technical process at all. You just pay a small fee and the name is changed in the birth certificate. So it merely contemplated the fact that you could have a child, then the father is not in the child's life, and after a while the father comes to his senses and realizes, I want this child.
A little too late.
Yes, and you'd already given them your name as the mother, so now you want to give them the father's name. So there's that allowance, because those first formative years of the child, a lot changes, and a lot of parents who want to change the name of the child do so between the ages of 0 and 2 mostly. So you can see that some of those cultural issues have been addressed in our laws to a little extent. Yes.
Expounding the scope just briefly, let's talk about grounds for divorce and separation. My question will be, is marital rape criminalized after separation?
So marital rape happens in a marriage, and our laws really did not envision marital rape, if that is a term I can use. They did not think it was possible. You can report a rape in a marriage. You can go and report and say that you were raped. It happened this way, give your particulars. But mostly you'll find that they're very difficult to convict. In fact, I've never heard of anyone convicted of marital rape. You can report, it can be investigated, you can be charged, but it is not a concept that we've really codified in our laws, because whereas rape just talks of penetration without consent, marriage, I feel, needs to be codified in a very specific way, because it happens in a way that people would not understand.
What happens? Marriage?
No, marital rape.
I'm joking.
Yeah.
Come on. I get it. Sorry, please.
Yeah. So someone may come and report marital rape, and the particulars they give would lead you to not understand the concept very much, even to people who are very well learned in matters sexual offenses, because someone will come and tell you, this man raped me in my home, in the bed we share every single day.
But isn't that because it's assumed that because you're married to an individual, that everything about their person then also is yours? So the issue of rape, when you're taking something without consent, when you're taking something from a power point of view, that doesn't then play in that circle, because you feel, and in my opinion wrongly so, that you can take it whenever you want it, however you want it, by virtue of the fact that you're married to them. That's where it becomes a vague grey area for a lot of folks.
Yeah, it is. And if you ask most of the people in the streets, conjugal rights are actually rights that are owed It is something that I am owed. It is not something that...
By both parties.
Exactly. But if I come to you as a husband and I tell you that my wife has denied me conjugal rights, a lot of people will feel for me and will actually be on my side. Why is he being denied?
As
Yet,
opposed to a woman who goes and makes the same claim?
it is hardly ever made by women, but I stand guided.
It's willing by a willing seller. Is it a ground for divorce or separation? Have we ever had an instance where such a case has been presented?
One of the grounds for divorce is cruelty, and that would amount to cruelty. It would also amount to irretrievable breakdown, which is another ground, because once a person maritally rapes you, then that relationship would be irretrievably broken. And it's also very cruel.
I mean, if you look at what we are saying,
Yes.
that relationship broke down. If it hadn't broken down, why would the rape even occur?
Exactly.
Why would that discussion even take place?
Yeah.
You see, that takes us to a different discussion, and that is on the subject of childbearing
Yes.
and the rights that a woman has to determine when it is she wants to bear a child and when she doesn't want to bear a child. And this brings in the discussion of family planning and how it is that one goes about it, because it is a source of very many issues.
Yes, I agree.
And it brings to this discussion this one point. When a woman gets married, is her body, or is it a partnership? Is there a joint ownership of it?
Let's take a break.
Yeah, I think we should.
At that point, so that we can think about that answer before things get set ablaze. It's 29 minutes to 10 o'clock, and maybe Wakili can then start to answer those questions because it gets sticky. Because it's all in the same family of a conversation that we're having this morning. Our Justice Thursday conversation today is right around divorce and separation, changing a name, and the different elements that come to play. And indeed, CT, as hot as it is, that's one of them. We'll come back and talk about that after this.
Fight a little longer, my friend. It's all worth it in the end. But when you got nobody to turn to, just hold on and I'll find.
Greetings, good people. Alan Warokyo here, and I have important news for you, okay?